before you then on the recommendations before you? Are we agreed? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Let us go over to notices of motion now. And the first notice of motion today is 10.1.1 LRT crossing safety. Who's moving this one? Councillor Collier-Kurt, you're standing up.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Second.
And Councillor Jones is seconding it, and also our chair of our Transportation Committee, Councillor Keating, as well as Councillor Jones and I crafted and put this together along with Doug Morgan. Thank you. And so I think I'm seeing one of the residents in the community that brought some of these items to our attention. And certainly when we were out there at many of the town hall meetings during the Olympic discussion, there was an unfortunate fatality that happened. And but we looked at it from a broader context, and having in mind that there are 63 at-grade LRT crossings in the city, there are many different various safety measures that are taken at each of these crossings. And how did decisions get made as far as what safety measures are in place at different crossings? And so this notice of motion is looking at what are the variety of tools that are used at these crossings, including audits and you'd be surprised to know that there's also a crossing review committee that I didn't realize was in place. So it would be interesting if our GM could tell us a little bit more about this crossing review committee. I don't think they report through our transportation committee, but that's also something that we want to look at. And also Calgary Transit does an excellent job at collecting data and monitoring different safety events across the whole system. So why are we doing this now? And administration is supportive of us looking at this and then reporting back publicly through the Transportation and Transit Committee so that members of the public can come forward and address any of the concerns that they may have. So if you support this today, Council, it would provide an at-grade LRT crossing report that is going to look at an inventory of all of the crossings in the city and the treatments that are applied from a safety measures perspective. It would look at an inventory of protection measures, what they target, the constraints, what the costs are. It would look at best practices in design from across the industry, a history of some of the incidents that have occurred, because we do have that data in conjunction with the police, how the city studies, adapts, and audits these crossings, and recommendations for council. We're looking at any additional programs or initiatives to enhance crossing safety in the city of Calgary on a go-forward basis, and if additional resources are required as a result of this analysis. We're looking at Q2 of 19 that administration feels that they can bring this back within that period of time. So with that, I'd open it for debate, and if there are any questions at all, I see our GM is here, and I'd be happy to answer them in the close. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of lights on. Let's start with Councillor Jones.
Mr. Thompson, when it says best practices in the design from across the industry and the history of incidents, the way I got it from Councillor Collier-Kurt was in the city of Calgary. When we do best practices design from other cities, can we also find out what their incidents are as well?
Your Worship, Councillor Jones, yes, for sure. We would look at other cities, what their incidents are and what the best practices are.
I think we did this about 4 or 5 years ago too, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember there was a death in Whitehorn.
Your Worship, I don't believe we've done this formally. I believe we sent you a couple of memos. So about 4 years ago, we sent you a memo that had a fair amount of information about incidents that had occurred across the system and work that we were doing. We sent you a follow-up memo this fall. But as Councillor Collier-Kurt mentioned, and we've worked with your office, we're happy to do this work. We had a lot of it underway already. We already do have the Crossing Review Committee, which is made up of senior management team within Calgary Transit. We also work with stakeholders in a number of different areas so that we're getting a holistic viewpoint of crossings. It's something that we take very seriously, and so we're happy to do this work.
When you're looking at best practices for design, could you also look at it from a perspective of a handicapped person? Because I've heard from a couple of people that they have a hard time with the maze gates in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Your worship, Councillor Jones, for sure we are always looking at accessibility to all of our crossings. There's a lot of trade-offs, obviously, that we do at some of these complex locations, but we can take that into consideration and provide feedback when we come back in Q2 on that.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell.
Thank you. I'll certainly support this. I'm wondering if there needs to be a budget associated with it. How big a body of work is this?
Councillor Farrell, thanks for the question. We're comfortable doing this work right now within our existing resources. Like I mentioned, we already have a lot of this underway.
Okay.
What will come out of it, though, there could be a budget request at the end of that report, and so that's when we'd have to be talking about budget requests.
Okay, thank you. Another question then is accessibility. I would like to add accessibility audit as well. Is that out of scope with this?
I just asked that.
You just asked that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can include some component on accessibility.
And I sit right beside you.
On accessibility, as I
Yeah.
mentioned to Councillor Jones, for the work we're already doing. If you'd like to go into more depth at the end of that, that's when we may need additional resources, obviously.
Well, it would, but even the gates to the library, they're so heavy. I have a hard time pushing them, and if you're in a wheelchair, there's no way. And so we're not just making it, we're making it worse than previously. And when we went on our tour, 3-city tour, we saw some really good examples of accessible crossings, and we seem to be going in the opposite direction.
It's, Councillor Farrell, appreciate the question. It's a balance that we run through, obviously, when we're looking at engineering on some of these situations. The library, we've heard a lot of feedback on that crossing. It's a complex area with trains coming in from the south, the northeast, the way that the signals work in that area. It's a lot different than other locations. Locations like Chinook Station, we've recently put in automatic gates to improve accessibility and pedestrian safety. That wouldn't work at the location by the library because the gates would be down for basically the majority of the time because of the interaction of the trains and the traffic in that location. So we always are looking at these issues. It's a very complex, they're very complex situations as we're working our way through. So we're happy to include accessibility in the discussion. And like I said, in Q2, if you feel we need more emphasis on it when we come back, that's where we need more resources.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Farkas, please.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Make sure you ask about accessibility.
I was actually going to go there. So maybe I'll just run through my list here. Would it be implicit in this work, or maybe a friendly amendment, that through it we can consult with our citizen committees on accessibility and the transit advisory group?
That's implicit through this work that we're already doing.
Perfect. And then nextly, I believe citizens had presented to the TNT committee regarding some concerns regarding the contraflow lanes for the bus rapid transit lanes along 14th Street. So I was wondering, would it be in scope to amend, or would it be proper to amend this to include BRT crossings, and hopefully to have some of those learnings that this work might lead us to inform the construction of other BRT pieces?
Councillor Farkas, thanks for the question. So that would be out of scope of this work. This work was specifically focused on LRT crossings. The work that you're talking about, I believe we had feedback at the TNT sessions a couple of years ago when we were going through the planning and design components of the Southwest BRT. Obviously, that piece of work is under construction right now. It goes into operation next year, so we don't have any information from that in an operational state right now. We had done the planning work and had brought in experts from across North America to help us with that. So I don't believe we would have any more information right now that would feed into this piece of work.
So this work would not be completed in time to be able to potentially inform any possible changes to the construction, say, Southwest BRT.
I would see them as two separate scopes of work because this work is focused on the LRT at-grade crossings. What you're talking about is a different situation, a different design, and work that we don't have any feedback on because it's still under construction.
And then somewhat related, how have we performed any sort of audit on the just proper rail crossings throughout the city? I don't want to steal Councillor Woolley's thunder, but having saw some coverage of the situation there at, say, at 8th Street, do we regularly take a look at these crossings in terms of what might be an infrastructure priority for eliminating them at grade?
Councillor Farkas, we're working with CP Rail on a number of pieces right now through some construction for the Green Line, for example, where we're looking at removing an at-grade crossing. So we're in constant conversation with them on that. Our signals group is looking at signal prioritization upgrades at some of the at-grade signal crossings from a heavy rail perspective. So we do have some interaction. Obviously, we don't own those crossings per se as the LRT components, so it is a bit of a different relationship.
And then lastly, some residents had contacted me regarding this important notice of motion that it could be an opportunity for us to also take a look at safety at the train stations themselves. So for example, some sort of investigation or measures into preventing push-offs from platforms, whether it's barriers and so on. And I think there's a number of recent unprovoked incidents that at least begs a little bit more of an exploration of this. So I was wondering where that sort of idea or opportunity might exist, if not in this work.
That would be a separate piece of work because, like we've mentioned, this is with respect to the LRT at-grade crossings. Safety at platforms is something that we take very seriously. We would have to take that offline and look at a separate piece of work for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Chu.
Thank you, Worship. Has any accident at, assuming it happened always at the crossing, and has any accidents actually equipment malfunctioning?
Councillor Chu, I don't know if we've had any accidents associated with equipment malfunction. A lot of our crossing equipment is designed to fail in safe mode. So if it does fail, it would fail in the safe mode. So the gate arms stay down, the gates swing in. So if there's ever a failure of the equipment, it's designed so that you don't have those issues. I'm not sure if we have had any problems or not, though.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is for city solicitor. Is there any lawsuit in regard to LRT accidents with this against the city? Or you can tell me.
I couldn't tell you at the moment as to whether there are any claims filed against the city for accidents with respect to LRT. Certainly there have been over the years.
Okay, thank you. In here, I didn't really see much of, I would definitely support this. However, the safety, I didn't really see education portion of it. There's something, transportation will look at it in the study? Fat fingers?
I actually couldn't hear your question.
Oh, in this notice motion, or you look at it, your understanding is what education to pedestrian and drivers, would that be part of it, of this study?
The last bullet, Sean.
Safety.
Too many microphones on.
Too many lights on.
There we go. All right, should work now.
Oh, they're perfect. Councillor Chu, I believe the question after each incident would this change. So whenever we do have an incident on the system, we do an investigation immediately after. We do lessons learned that we would then take back into and make changes to the system as required. So we're always doing investigations after any incident and trying to take those lessons learned.
Thank you. The reason why I asked that is that we had this long debate on pedestrian safety, and every time it seems like we talk about responsibility, it's always talking about the drivers of any sort, and seldom we talk about personal responsibility of pedestrian. I remember very clearly that's one of the points that Councillor Sutherland made many times, and that on this one too. So I hope this a big part of it is education, not only the vehicle, but mostly the pedestrians.
Yes, Councillor Chu, we always look at safety with respect to at-grade crossings from the 5 E's, we call them, engineering, education, evaluation, engagement, and enforcement. And so education is a big piece of that. So making sure that people are aware at crossings is a big component of it.
Okay. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Just a couple, and I did send a video to Ms. Kennedy. I mean, might be somewhat off topic, but a very serious incident, which had occurred a couple of years ago, occurred at the 11th Street at grade crossing. So it was actually interesting as I was reading this notice of motion on Thursday last week, and I had this video sent to me. This is the 11th Street CP line in the belt line. And just people on their daily commute from Kirby Station to the Beltline, just crawling through trains by the dozens. Anyways, I recognize that it's not within the scope of this work, but I think how people move through cities, how pedestrians, cyclists, bikes, everybody moves through cities this is very much our job, and this was very disconcerting, and so I really appreciate. That's fine, thanks. I really appreciate this notice of motion, particularly with how devastating you can imagine that these two events would have been on the families and drivers of these. One of the things I didn't see in this notice of motion was just around speed coming into stations, because, and I was involved on the library board in terms of that where the train comes out and how they're activating and animating that space, and that in our downtown center city, they're just crosswalks where people walk across like they would on any street. And that anything outside of that center city is where this committee gets in, and so you don't want to over design, right? And so how are you looking at speed, or how do you think about speed within this notice of motion? Because the measure of success of our commuter LRT system is based on speed, and I can tell you, if these drivers were going 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 20 kilometers coming into that station, that this might have been averted. And these are decisions that we make where there are trade-offs, right? Which is that these trains come into these stations real hot, and the speeds through which they move through our downtown core are significantly slower.
Councillor Woolley, you've hit on one of the components of the trade-offs that we're always evaluating. I can tell you we look at speed significantly when we're looking throughout the system in the design, and it's not just downtown. In the suburban communities, when I was working on the design of the Martindale station, the stations and the extension there, that was one of the evaluations we had. What was the speed of the train coming into the stations with an at-grade crossing? The crossings where there is no station, we're always evaluating speed as a component of it. But like you've mentioned, as you slow down the speed, you slow down the system, the transit system for everyone on it. And so how do we safely design the system to maximize travel time for people so that we can move as many people as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible. So speed is something that we always look into. It's part of the engineering component that I mentioned, and that would be one of the pieces that we'd be bringing back in 2019 is to explain that to you.
So I don't want to mess with this notice of motion, but would we have a sense of here's what the speeds entering Martindale Station versus Chinook Station are?
For sure, we'll bring that back, and we have an understanding of what that is. So we design the system.
Okay.
We post the speeds at the different segments where we're slowing trains down, and so we can bring that back and have that conversation.
Okay. So, do you want me? I'll just leave it as is then, and just assume.
I believe it's fine. It's something we'll bring back as part of it.
Thank you.
Largely asked and answered. This is a, well, yeah. I could waggishly bring up accessibility, but I think we've addressed that. This is on behalf of the mover. In light of all the conversation that we've had around the table, the further be it resolved that administration report back to the SBC on Transportation and Transit Committee by Q2 2019. Obviously, I think in light of what we've heard, a report back for information would not be appropriate. A report back with recommendations, budget, stuff like that would be appropriate. Do we need to firm that up, or are we loud and clear on this work?
Your worship, Councillor Cry, I would say that the last bullet, recommendations for council on additional programs or initiatives that will address crossing safety, I believe it's in there. We're not going to bring back something for information. We'll come back with recommendations. Like we mentioned, though, the question about budget will come in at that point.
Yeah, as it absolutely should. So thank you very much, and looking forward to this work.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I agree that this is important work for the safety. I still have some issues when I was talking about in terms of, as Councillor Chu has mentioned, is education. And we know through the pedestrian strategy, unfortunately, by visiting all the schools, I go to all the schools in my ward, that they actually do not teach pedestrian safety in the schools. It's up to that particular principal. If they decide to do so, it's not mandated. So I found that shocking. Because when I went to school, it was an automatic. And I think we got to go to the source of the matter is better education. We need to be talking to our partners to say that when you do this research, that's when we really got to have a sit down with the different school boards and that and say, listen, this is a real serious matter. People are ignoring these things on a regular basis. Please be part of the solution. I think that really needs to happen. As I mentioned before, my sister-in-law lives in New York City. I go there almost every single year. I use the subway and everything. And I can tell you in terms of safety standards, we outrank New York like tenfold in safety standards of what they have. And it's much more dangerous, but they don't tend to have that significant amount of accidents because people know and they're taught the safety and there seems to be less issues. I'm going to be concerned about is if we come back and look at, and what Councillor Woolley has mentioned is to make sure that we don't start over-engineering, because that could actually cause the opposite effect, where if it becomes difficult for people, they get frustrated and they just ignore everything and go anyway. So we'll have that problem too. So I think there's a really good balance to take a look at and use that expertise. So I hope in this report that balance will occur. And but I still strongly feel that education, that we know that gap is there. And I find it very personally very frustrating that the school boards have not jumped on board to help fill that long-term gap, because if they're learning in elementary, we're not going to have the problems junior high, high school. If we're not doing this right now, it's just going to be this continuous circle. So I really hope we can advocate, and maybe that's something the mayor could do in terms of with the school boards to say this is really a serious matter, and I'm just shocked it's not mandated. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was actually going to comment on Martindale and our tour and some of the good discussions we had. We had and this is good work. Thank you for bringing it forward. We had a safety review done probably a year ago at Saddletown Circle, and the train goes through there. There's a number of crossings there. And one of the recommendations was for a pedestrian bridge potentially across from Saddletown Station into the Genesis Center and the high school. So I just want to make sure that, I mean, we've done some of that work in some locations. And I guess as a part of this, that you're going to go back and scour through the most recent work we've done to pull out what you need to inform this. Is that a part of the scope?
Councillor Chahal, thanks for the question. So a pedestrian bridge at Saddletown Circle would be something separate from this piece of work. This piece of work would really be focusing on the at-grade crossings with the LRT system and the safety associated with those. The volume of people going to Genesis Center, it would be something separate.
So that was a recommendation that came out of that, is what I'm saying, and it might come out of this as well. I'm using it as an example, I guess. And we know we've done some of that work, and then that was an outcome of it.
If there was locations that grade separation came back with, it obviously could be a part of the recommendation. It's always a balance, and it gets back to the conversation that we're having actually about over-engineering as well. When you look at Chinook Station, it used to have a pedestrian grade separated, what we call a station head, where you went up and crossed the tracks elevated above them. We changed that. We went to an at-grade crossing. It's more convenient for people. And we had some good success, but like we mentioned, or I mentioned, we've switched to automatic gate arms there based on some near misses we were seeing. So we did do some changes there. So we're always doing this evaluation. Every situation is different, and we're always balancing that over-engineering versus finding the right community fit.
So also looking at, I guess, the Green Line as we're building the new stations and the potential, the crossings that are going to come with that. The timing of the work we're doing here and being able to incorporate that, it looks like Q2 2019, and I guess that will be an ongoing process. As any learnings you get out of this, you'll be pulling over into that. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor Chahal, for sure. We're always, any learnings we're getting, we're informing our design criteria for any new infrastructure coming forward, and any learnings we had from this we would integrate into the Green Line project.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carral. You're rising on a point of privilege.
Well, yeah, I just want to suggest that Councillor Sutherland's debate, while definitely well put in terms of an opinion, did not match up with the facts. The fact is that the City of New York is spending ridiculous amounts of money on on separating modes, putting in cycle tracks and stuff like that, and the investments they're making are resulting in a tremendous reduction in very high pedestrian casualties throughout that system. So to suggest that New York was a place where, it was a lot less safe, but people were fine with it because they were more aware, the numbers didn't bear that out. And to suggest that actually spending money on over-engineering doesn't work. I definitely would agree that grade separating where it's not necessary, but actually creating specific facilities and spending the money to do that is, showing in a tremendous amount of saving lives, basically saving lives and saving injury. And New York's the poster child for why people are putting in all kinds of money into separating different modes in effective ways. So
I'm not convinced that was a point of privilege, but thank you.
Okay.
I have some other things I was going to say, but I won't say them as a relevant part of this. No, it's okay.
Quickly?
We've gone a little off topic anyway, so let's get right back on it and you can close.
Oh, good, okay. So I would just ask this crossing review committee, it would be nice to kind of consider that and how citizens can have a say or a voice on such a committee. I don't see the citizen appointments coming through the accessibility piece because it's not only about that, but if we could just be open to more citizen involvement in some of these things, it would be nice. I want to remind council that it was Councillor Farrell, 5 years ago that she and I took the lead on the public transit safety audit. And it resulted in some significant changes in our whole system. So we've been on this for a long time. And this is just an additional piece of work that I think members of council can all identify with as being a priority. So thanks for the discussion.
Thanks. On the recommendations before you, then, are we agreed? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll be back in half an hour.